Okay, so now we move on to the questions. I got a few, but it'd be greedy to pile straight in there. So would anybody who'd like to ask a question raise their hand, please? Now you see, you can do better than that. We're here to debate and discuss. That's good. Okay, just down there. Don't forget name and organisation, etc., please.
My name's Tony Walker. I'm the technical producer for Ornhead Arts. We're a rural, national and international arts company based on Dartmoor. The things that you've all been speaking about, we're kind of doing that at the moment. We've got a project called Tuning Wheels, which it's a global project collecting audio music and bringing it in. But it's finding that audience to get everything out again. And we build social networks, closed-wall social networks for groups that we work with. We're building a literacy map. It's a map to do with all the literacy that's been based in Devon. And it's finding that audience. We can create all this stuff. We teach people how to do it, but it's actually finding that audience. Have you got any advice on that? Okay, so great content, tricky to connect with an audience. Mark?
Well, I mean, I think, in a crowded digital world, it's hard for for everyone, even the very, very biggest players, wrestle with this issue. I mean, it seems to me there's in this world there's two things going on. One of which is there are some big aggregators, and the BBC is definitely one of those, where many millions of people, for example, go from the BBC's website to UK newspaper sites and go to art sites from. And often at the BBC, things happen in unexpected ways. I mean, we often Google kindly share kind of interesting data points about the BBC and Google. And there was one Saturday there was a gigantic spike of interest in the search terms BBC plus Pompeii, and this was after an episode of Doctor Who. I mean, one of the most powerful web reactions in the arts world we've had was the Doctor Who episode about Van Gogh last year, which again sparked immense interest in people who are not normally interested in art. So I would say that it's incumbent on the BBC, but some of the other big websites to look hard at the way they feature the arts and how they lead people to other more specialist, more in some ways perhaps more interesting parts of the web. But obviously also. There are these environments like YouTube, where what's astonishing is YouTube is full of smash hits which have been found serendipitously by users of YouTube on the web. And there are these other very powerful disaggregated ways in which a single piece of content can find a mass audience, and somehow or other both of those things are true at the same time.
Tom, can you add a little bit of science to that? Because it is a really important point, because it's really the fame point, the brand point. If you're not known, if you're invisible and you create some content, yes, Mark's absolutely right, you might get lucky, you might get picked up, it might go viral, but it is a lottery. Is there any way, any specific advice you could give to this chap to say, these are sort of measures you need to undertake to ensure you have the best possible chance of connecting with the widest possible audience?
I think there are. I think this is an area that we're learning about now. I mean, we have projects which just disappear. We'd love to be able to put them all on the front page of our website, but we're not allowed, for good reason. Yeah. And we have projects that just disappear, and you're like, but I thought it was brilliant. I think there are, and actually it'd be better to have one of our marketing people here who understand the kind of the levers you can pull. So you have to understand that there is organic search, there is sponsored search where there are promoted videos, there are there's now promoted tweets, there's understanding the channels that are there, there's sort of all the social networks that you're able to use. I think that a growing trend is curated search. So this is a very interesting area in that it kind of implies that search needs to catch up in that we're actually looking to each other to tell us what's great. And you can find those key opinion formers who now hide behind little Twitter monikers. And they're really crucial. They will drive interest. But the other thing to bear in mind is that I come from Devon, so this is of interest to me. That within a niche, you have to understand the technological abilities of your your audience as well. Sort of the stuff I put on, the stuff that's really popular, I think is boring and geeky, but it's really popular. That's the things that people look for, because that's where I've got associated. So understanding your audience is just as important as understanding the channels that you can use to reach them. And yes, there is science to it, but I think the science is evolving.
Okay. Lady down here.
Hi, I'm Sydney Thornberry from WebPlay. We're an arts education charity, and we basically use technology to further and enhance the live theater experience for young audiences. And I think this is a fantastic initiative. I think it'll fill a big gap about how smaller organizations who are slightly behind the curve can develop the skills that they need to get their stuff out there, which I think is fantastic. But I feel that the really great potential for digital for us as an arts sector is to bring smaller organizations together to work quite strategically to basically reach their audiences. So, for example, from the young people's theater perspective, they tend to be smaller organizations. We built an online platform called Page to Stage so that those theater companies could license the platform for us and have a safe space for kids to create online collaborative projects between them and the theater companies. But what we have found is that a lot of the theater companies don't understand how to create the digital content to begin with. So we give them the space, but again, it's the content conversation. But this issue about reaching audiences, we're now trying to develop a platform which is sort of a one-stop shop so that teachers can just go there and get everything related to young people's theater, from learning about why theater is important to be in the curriculum or in schools, to what shows are playing by them, to purchasing tickets, to getting education resources. I think the digital concept of providing...
This is great, but can we just...
I swear I'm getting to the question, which is, has there been, once you have all these people who are creating all this digital content, has there been any thinking between the BBC and the Arts Council about how you strategically deliver that stuff to primary and secondary schools, especially at a time where arts education is under threat? Because I think that's a really, really important thing. Like Google could do an educator search. Those kinds of things to be able to access the audiences who need the content.
Alan, did you get that?
Yeah, and I think the answer is we haven't had that level of conversation yet. We're in the early days of the partnership, but I think the points you make are well made. And I think the important point you made about helping smaller organisations, get together. Is going to be important, and one of the things that we're looking at in our kind of other exercise, the big funding exercise, is that, resilience, small organisations, how do we kind of act as a marriage broker or whatever to get people to think about working together better and aggregating their knowledge, and there's a whole issue about data as well.
But what do you say, with Alan, the specific question is, are we within the scope of this project? Is it being considered how content would be delivered to schools, primary and secondary schools? Is that within the scope of what we're trying to achieve?
Not specifically as a particular strand, but I think it's kind of within our wider kind of view of the world in the next 4 years. And there's going to be sort of wider things that we're doing. But it's not an explicit strand at the moment.
But Mark, it's a good point.
I think it's an incredibly good point, actually. And I think what we should do is we should try and join this bit up to some of the other thinking, about what the BBC does in terms of supporting schools, but also in a way what we've learned from things like National Poetry Day, and from indeed this year with the big literature thing we do this year and so on, which is really almost generalising. We've become better at partnering to get a particular moment where schools are already ready, as it were, to connect to a big cultural moment around an anniversary or around a particular theme. But it's almost like generalising that and not just relying on these spot moments, but thinking about it. I think it's very interesting we should take that away. And I think there's nothing that we're doing here which means it can't happen, but we need to do ask ourselves some more questions.
You've highlighted the potential for the future. Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. Oh, now they come. Fantastic. Pick one. I don't know. There. Look, right in the middle. Quite difficult to get to. Yeah, you, sir. Yeah, but you need a microphone.
Hello, I'm Gavin Sharp. I'm Chief Executive of Ban on the Wall in Manchester. We've been developing digital content over the last 18 months. We've got several hours of fantastic live music that we've recorded to HD quality, multi-camera shoot. And we're very much looking forward to the development of the IPTV concept and how we can get some of that content out there. We think it's great, we stand by it. And I just wonder if you can give us some advice on what the mechanism may well be, and what the mechanism will be for the kind of curating algorithms that are going to sit behind the IPTV players. I know that both Google and BBC are working on those, and whether you're intending to collaborate at all and work together on those in any way.
Well, so on the second point, I mean, I think that if you look at the latest version, if you look at version 3, V3 of iPlayer, you can see that actually the way we're thinking about this, we think there's going to be lots of different ways in which people will discover content. You know, there'll be the stuff we think is great, you know, the BBC think is great, and we've got, you know, the BBC's full of, some ways the BBC, you know, it is passionate curation. It's whether it's Radio 1 or it's Radio 3, that's, you know, so what our guys think is the best stuff. There's the stuff you yourself have chosen in the past, and we know from Amazon and the rest of it. There's what your friends are watching and listening to. So, you know, hooking up to Facebook and, you know, and so on. There's what other people are listening to right now. And I think in the broader sense that we're, although I think we think that the bias towards, you know, as it was, use the phrase, the social discovery of content, discovery content, in the end, a kind of digital version of word of mouth and getting a sense of what others are up to is going to be more and more important. Actually, we think there's going to be lots of different ways of finding content. And actually, you know, an important thing is making sure that these are places and platforms where serendipity and exploration is possible. So with the IPTV platform that the BBC is a founding shareholder of, YouView, you know, the intention with YouView is there'll be a kind of app store and lots of different apps and lots of different, you know, offerers of content with a pretty low cost model of how you get on the platform, and where the public, you know, will have a chance to choose. And what will win will be both the people who've got the best content, but also the people who've found the best ways of getting that content noticed, which takes us back to the first question.
Tom, what are you doing on, or do you know what you're doing?
I have no idea.
Do you have, how reassuring. Well, do you have a view on IPTV and how important it is to this audience?
I actually sort of feel like I'm not in a position to talk on it. There are a lot of technologies that I know sort of from the inside, and then there are those that you just see coming, and I think I'm probably pretty much with everyone else, and I'm just kind of quite excited about it. I think it just breaks down barriers, it breaks down platforms. I think it's very, very hard to foresee how it will work. And for me, things...
Google's got a huge part to play in it. Surely it's a search engine within IPTV. That's how people are going to find stuff, isn't it?
Honestly, I am really not well enough informed.
So what what is both exciting but also in a way kind of scary about IPTV is that almost everyone believes it's coming, it's going to happen. A very large number of TV sets have already been made with IPTV functionality built in. So in other words, you can plug it into the broadband as well as into an aerial or into cable or satellite, whatever. But I think it's fair to say, I don't think we yet understand, if you go back to the most basic thing about behaviours, about what people want from television, how they're going to present themselves, if you like, in front of this big screen. And I mean, the BBC, I mean, we take actually a slightly different view from, I mean, I've talked to colleagues at Google, both here and in Mountain View, and we take a slightly different view from Google. I mean, we think that in a sort of sit-back, big-screen television context, that probably people are going to be more comfortable with a television-like experience, very simple interface, you know, kind of one thumb navigation and a, you know, a big premium on its good quality and it works right away, as opposed to the extraordinary immediate choice you get from, for example, from the Google search page where you know the world's your oyster and you might get 10 million responses in 0.21 seconds sort of thing. But we may well be, I mean, that's our view, but we're TV people, TV and radio people. You could say, well, to the man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. You would say that. What's exciting, and I think in a sense part of the offer we're making today is we're going on this journey. We'd love all of you to come on the journey, and somewhere between here and the great city of Oz, we'll find out how IPTV works for the public. And
I suppose the follow-up question to that, which is for you, Nick, is we are on this journey, and it's 18 months and all the rest of it, and it looks lovely. But what outputs are you really expecting? Are you expecting just a bunch of people to get together and have a nice chat? Or are you really expecting Barbican, the arts, the arts sector in this country to actually create something concrete and identifiable from this project?
Well, the fundamental point I was trying to make, and it's really reassuring to hear it made by Google and the BBC as well, is we don't know how people are going to behave until they do it. We don't know how people are going to react to internet TV until it happens. And the danger of investing huge resources down one particular route closes off your options. And that's why we're saying one step at a time, we've got to be very creative and very open about it. And I really like Tom's point about the small groups of people working together.
I'm in danger of expressing a personal opinion.
You're allowed to do that. It's the arts. You can just say whatever you want.
But no, I don't know much about IPTV, and I don't like talking about things when I don't know about them. I have played with a Google TV in the States, and I used it in both ways. Actually, you explore and play, and it's just a different way of experiencing these things, so you can't give you an answer to that. What I would say is that it's not, I think TV as that kind of box in the corner thing is probably likely to change. I have a 2-year-old niece, and I see her with her granddad's iPad and her mum's iPhone, and the TV and Teletubbies on the TV or whatever, and complete confusion as to why they are not all the same thing interacting in the same space and why. So those sorts of things, this kind of multi-surface experience where your phone controls the TV, controls your interaction, and there's multiple surfaces, that definitely is something which can't happen without internet television. So that sort of step on is just a fascinating place for any arts. I speak as an artist. For an artist to think in those kind of spaces is an extraordinary possibility.
Good. Okay. And I think we're going to experiment with different approaches to curation and findability, and we need to. And we'll have some interesting times.
And your hope is that it comes up with something completely unique and something completely creative that no one ever thought of before and no one could have done before. I mean, YouTube Symphony Orchestra is a really interesting example because at the end of that, you do actually end up with a normal symphony orchestra. And the really exciting thing about a YouTube Symphony Orchestra would be if everybody was able to play in the 240 different countries they come from. And that would really be something.
We'll leave you with that, Tom. We'll take another question. Okay, lady there.
Hi, Jackie Devereux from the Community Media Association. I have a slightly different question, not about audiences so much, but about the deliverers of training. We obviously work closely with the BBC anyway, and will continue to do so. But within this project, or as alongside this project, is there scope for smaller audio-visual training providers and digital skills training providers, like my sector, so community radio, community TV, to actually get involved on that kind of level as well, particularly with smaller organisations in localities?
So can I just clarify that? I mean, are you looking for an opportunity to work with, or are you concerned that it might be a threat too? Okay, Mark.
Well, I very much hope it's the first, not the second. I mean, this is, I mean, I think it's great we're doing it. I think in terms of the, as it were, demand in this space, I think there's a vast amount of demand, and this is, as it's conceived, a relatively small piece of supply, and I also think that, in a way, what I hope this is going to be is almost like a kind of whetting of the appetite, and a way in to a world where actually the kind of delivery of of the full training and skills required is actually going to happen afterwards. So it's almost like trying to get a big front door in which we can get people to go through, but with an expectation that many of them, once they've been through that door, will then want to pursue it on a much more detailed basis. But we should talk about exactly how we can configure it with you, so that's the outcome we get.
Yeah, I mean, this alone isn't going to kind of solve our capability needs going forwards.
Sounds like Alan Davies' door is open to you.
My door's always open.
Yeah. Okay, next question. Yes, sir.
Hi, Bill Thompson from the BBC Archive. I noticed a lot of discussion from Nick and in fact all of you about the potential and the need to experiment, and Tom mentioned the desire to fail quietly, to try things out. But of course within the BBC and within Arts Council funded organisations, failing quietly is important, because if you're found out to have failed, there can be quite significant consequences. So how do you encourage a culture of innovation and experiment around these digital tools and let people fail without feeling they have to keep it either from senior managers or indeed from anyone else, that they will suffer?
I'm going to give that to Nick Kenyon.
I seem to remember failing quite often without horrendous consequences. Look, of course, I really like that phrase as well about failing quietly. You've got to allow the space for experiment to take place, but at the same time control it in a managerial sense so that resources are being used sensibly. At the Barbican, there's all sorts of work going on behind the scenes that doesn't make it onto the website, that doesn't make it into content, because you're getting to try and formulate ideas and then see whether we want to invest in them, whether they work or not. We need to put a huge investment at the moment into our whole website operation, because it is simply so far behind the rapidly evolving times. So I think that's much more a question of managerial sensitivity and allowing the right people to work together in the right groups, scrutinising the work before it actually comes into the full glare of day.
Alan, you've got a slightly harder task, which we all know you're going to go through in the next couple of weeks, and none of us envy it. I look forward to covering it, though.
I look forward to your coverage.
But you've got to make that judgment call. Very difficult to do if you're running in an organisation. Much harder at arm's length, like you are, where you kind of got to trust, and then it's not always obvious if it's succeeding or failing. And often with these digital initiatives, it's a huge leap into the dark. How are you going to judge when you've made an investment into one of your organisation's digital capacity? How are you going to judge whether it's working or not working? And when do you call it?
I mean, we've got to use a kind of sensitive ear, if you like. And it's a sensitive ear that we've partly built up with the way we fund things at the moment, but we'll develop further as we start funding new, quite possibly quite small, very innovative digital things. You know, I think we've, by experience, recognised when it's time to stop. And we've got to be realistic and not just the kind of liberal parents that just let things go on and on forever. Although I'm getting away from the parent-child relationship with our clients, I must remember that.
You married Mark earlier.
I know, it's a difficult day in family terms.
But the difficult choice which your organisations have to make, which we have to make as well at the moment, is how much do you reprioritise into this stuff? Because if you're going to do it seriously and resources are not expanding, you're talking about shifting stuff away from A to B.
Mark wants to speak.
Well, two things. I mean, I think the reason, but the way I put the challenge is actually most people in this room will understand the idea of creative risk taking kind of within a given discipline. I mean, you know, if you want a situation comedy or an arts program in my world, you accept not every comedy you commission is going to be a great show, and in fact, you won't get the great shows unless you're prepared to have some shows which don't work. That's the way it works. That's it. It's recognising, really, for the reasons Tom said, we don't even really know where all of the boundaries or the direction of travel is in this stuff. And sometimes you may go very far off track because, you know, in a sense, it's a completely unknown space. But the other thing, and again, it goes back to something Tom said, we've got other cultural challenges as well. I mean, I think this business, which can seem like a small thing about clean data, is a really important point, this. If people are going to find it's going to work, it's going to be there, you look for it, it's there. It requires a level of consistency and discipline and grappling with metadata and also trying to agree common standards on these things around all of our archives and all the rest of it, which this part of if you like, the way things work in the UK has not been very good at. And there's something about getting more disciplined about all of that. Because in a world of search and algorithms, if you don't do that, the stuff will not work no matter how good it is in terms of its creative conception.
Okay, next question. Probably our last question. Okay, the lady there.
Hi, Rachel French, MEMA, Middlesbrough Institute of Modern Art. It's a question about resourcing. In terms of building the digital capacity from within an arts organisation, what does the panel think about the fact that we live in a world where IT is mostly outsourced and that there's a lot of potential for working with IT services firms who also could learn a lot from working with cultural institutions?
Yeah, can I just add a supplementary to that? Would you mind? It's just that within this, the concept of this shrinking budget, what won't you do to allow you to build digital capacity? Nick. Well, you said yes. You nodded very sagely.
I only nodded yes to the fact that that's the question. And just like the BBC finds it very difficult to stop doing things, so do we find it difficult to stop doing things. But say you do slightly less of one thing, you just shave off the number of live events that you might do in a particular arts sector of the organisation in order to build up a capacity, then the issue of how you collaborate with outsourcing organisations is really critical, and that's to do with best value and expertise. And we totally recognise that we haven't got the expertise in-house to do all this ourselves, and that's where the whole collaborations and partnerships thing comes in. And that's where you say that if you can find those who have the expertise, and let's be clear about this is not about big and small organisations, because a lot of small organisations have fantastic expertise in their area from which we need to learn. But I think, I don't know whether other people from arts organisations would agree, there is such an inbred sense in arts organisations of building their own brand and succeeding on their own terms that militates against collaboration and partnership. And that's what I think the Arts Council is giving a fantastic lead on at the moment. We really need to unpick that so that we can, as we're doing with the Barbican, put together an alliance around East London and have a collection of organisations that are genuinely prepared to share expertise in an undefensive way.
And sharing branding. I mean, it took the BBC and the British Museum slightly longer than you'd ideally have liked to work out that the as it were, the poster for a History of World Hundred Objects should have the BBC brand in one corner and the British Museum in the other, and actually that was good for both brands and sort of tick, you know. The other thing I want to say that I think the other thing is, in terms of the relationship with the IT provider, whether it's in-house or outsourced, is. Again, it's a point Tom made, which I think is such an important thing, which is that it can't be, as it's sometimes been in the past, and we all know this, a sort of, I've got a brilliant idea, would you mind making a few notes and then doing a bit of engineering? And the technologists are sources of creativity and originality, and some of the breakthroughs are going to come from the technologists. And the most important thing is realising that this is the creativity in this exercise is going to be shared, and it's going to be a computer engineer, a computer scientist who potentially is going to be your best partner in working this out. And that again is, so rather than thinking this is a bit of the kind of zone of marketing, and it is like, the person who makes the posters, the person who makes the programme. This is very, very big, and it may be that the conversation you're having is going to be the person on the other side of the table who comes up with the breakthrough idea.
Alan, can I just ask you then very specifically on that note about this particular partnership, because it's a very good question. And Nick's absolutely right, the subsidised arts are prone to a spot of insularity given half a chance. This is broadly, this partnership is between the Arts Council and the BBC for your RFOs, but it's good to see Tom there being invited. But is the idea that that the net is going to be thrown wider for that, for this conversation, for these masterclasses, for these workshops, that the subsidised arts community, most of whom are represented here, will also get to meet, rub shoulders with, share ideas with, partner with organisations which aren't subsidised, which might be Google, or it might be Universal Music, or it might be Warner Brothers, who knows? But is that part of the ambition for the project?
In another kind of neck of the Arts Council woods, as it were, and this whole resilience point involves promiscuity of partnerships and promiscuity of creative relationships, if you like. So I was just going to sort of, in answer to that last question, we're going on about philanthropy and that kind of stuff, but that it's not just about money, it's about expertise, and it's about people offering that 20%, the kind of 20% projects that Tom was referring to, and using the generosity of companies like Google, I'm sure.
Tom, I'm going to give you the last word on this. Yeah. We're going to have a cup of tea.
Okay.
How should the arts, in a sentence or two, what would be the best way for this sector, maybe with your help, to build digital capacity?
Well, I think I'm sort of going to say what everyone's just said, which is, and it's a nice word. It's actually probably a weird word, sort of friendship. Now, the thing that I think arts institutions sometimes forget is that people really love the arts. Developers really love the arts. Engineers really love the arts. Like, we go to, well, friends, we go to shows. We sort of, I was at the Nat Mellors opening at the ICA the other night, and I was really struck by how little technology there was there. A wonderful show. But I think it's kind of key to understand from their perspective as well. These things depend on scale. So, I mean, when you are talking about a large sort of project involving a number of developers over a period of time, these are big, difficult things, and you're going to have to contribute. At which point, I do think it goes back to that idea that, that institutions can band together. You can work to build platforms for yourselves rather than just for yourself. I think that's a key way to go. But I would suggest reaching out to the audience, to the people that you want to work with first, and offering them something. If you do developer days at an art gallery, you'd be really surprised to see how many people turn up. You might be really surprised if no one turns up, but that's always a hazard, You have plenty to offer. And I think that by opening the door to them first, and then seeing what they have to offer from their side, this would be, for me, the first step that I'd like to take, especially when you're local institutions.
Tom, thank you very much. We've just gone past our time. I'm sorry, we won't have time for another question. We've got to take a small break. Could you all put your hands together for a very, very good panel discussion? Thank you.